the background is that some survey work had been done, and you're probably aware of that. And that survey work led to a lot of this work being initiated. And you've got a Facebook link there to get that stuff yourself at your own time. So my sense of that is that I believe that what we should be doing in Fiji is really be focusing on the domestic market. As you know, the pandemic has had a huge impact, and honey consumption in Fiji is low comparatively to other places around the world. And we're getting closer to the end of the pandemic, and hopefully we'll see the suitcase market re-emerge when tourists come back into Fiji in greater numbers. And I think we're going to get the first lot of tourists coming in next month. And I know some of the hotels in Nandi and the Coral Coast and up in, up along Kings Road are going to want to open up and get tourists in. So that's sort of what I'm trying to sort of focus our efforts on, is really to focus on growing your volume and value of your business that's currently there, and hopefully you can emulate some of the brands that are out there now in the marketplace that are competing. Let's recap. I've done 2 seminars so far. One is on branding and product positioning. The other is on labeling. And packaging now brings the sort of communications and product strategies together. And we need to make decisions about the forms that we pack our honey in, because that's going to be critical. So you can see in the bottom of that, look beyond what you can see, think potential. So this session today is really about being a bit more visionary and starting to think ahead by looking at what's happening in the region. So before we get into that, I want you to reflect on distribution and product placement, because that is really a key ingredient in the market place for you in the future. So I want you to think about, where are you today? And on the right side of that screen, I've got this sort of very confusing spreadsheet, which is a large Excel spreadsheet. And I prepared that to help some of you who want help to understand and explore potentially where new distribution options may be available. And I use this all over the world. I use it for helping small and large companies in Australia and in the region and in the work that I do, because I want you to look at the sort of 5 domestic channels that exist. And I'm not going to share the spreadsheet with you because it's quite involved, but if you want a copy, contact me and I'll be able to sort of help you with it. So when I look at market channels, the most important market channels is the market channel that you're currently in now, which is what I call the traditional informal. And you're probably all dealing with farm gate sales and the roadside and the municipal market and certain events that you might be having around where you live. Depends on whether you're in Manu level or whether you're in Viti level. There's obviously less opportunities in Tabayuni and Viti, and the Manu level. Whereas in Viti level, you've got more opportunities in Lautoka and Nandi and Suva, right? And you're probably happy with that current arrangement. Your probably supply of honey is probably meeting what you currently are able to produce or acquire from other growers or suppliers. So the other 2 channels, and the most important one that I see are the modern retail channels. And these are the modern supermarkets where you probably now starting to do most of your shopping. If you're living in Suva and Lautoka, Nandi, etc., you're probably frequenting the supermarket, and people go and buy in these accounts and basically take home and consume. And these are typically bricks and mortar structures. And in the rest of the world, the modern retail outlets have become the big place where you can distribute your products. The next one is the place where you eat foods and beverages outside of the home, and we normally call it the food service or the horeca. Horeca meaning hotels, restaurants and catering. And that is also a large market segment where products are consumed in the ready-to-eat form. So for anybody looking at where their marketplaces are, food service is one of the top three. The next one is industrial buyers. And I coined that term industrial buyers because these are organizations, producers, value adders that are buying product in its raw form and then making something out of your product, out of your raw material. And many times we have byproducts from our processing or excess product that normally we want to find a home for. And industrial markets are really important to explore and to understand whether there are opportunities. And then the last one, the fifth one, is really online web enabled formats via your laptop and your internet and your smartphone, etc., where you go and buy products online through a shopping cart, you pay, and then someone guarantees that you're going to get that product delivered. That category, that channel has grown enormously in Australia, most possibly in Fiji as well, because of the lockdowns that we experienced across the whole world and the whole region. And online has become a favoured new channel for a lot of producers. And many are actually looking at that model and are transforming their business models accordingly. The other channel that I want to talk about just very quickly is the suitcase market. And I call it suitcase market because it really targets visitors coming in from overseas who arrive in Nandi or arrive by yacht or arrive by a sea cruise and, end up in a five-star hotel and end up shopping, or they go into Tapu's or Jack's or travel in the region in their hire cars, and they might visit your place and they might buy your honey. And traditionally, we used to get roughly 700 to 900,000 visitors coming into Fiji. And it's a market segment which is hard to track, but we know it's very significant because a lot of visitors are looking for products that are coming from Fiji that they can take home, either to New Zealand or to Australia, that's different, or into Asia, if they're from China or Korea or Japan, or from the US. And they're an important segment of consumers because if you can connect with them, they can go online later and buy your products. So we don't have to wait for them to come to Fiji. We can also connect and grow that suitcase market. And I'm open to discussions about that later when we have any questions about that. So I think this should be a priority consideration for all people now because we've got some time to start preparing to look at how is this new situation going to emerge now after COVID. And then, of course, we have this other channel because exporting by sea container, by sea or by air, is really something for export-ready companies. And we don't have a lot of exports or any exports that I know of that are going into overseas markets from Fiji at the moment. So that is the opportunity for the future. And I'll talk, later on about what's happening in New Zealand and what they are doing with exports. So the point here is tourism will open in Fiji. Will you be prepared? So the summary here is understanding market requirements is the key in packaging selection and investment decisions. So if you understand the channels that you're going to go into and the various consumers and shoppers that are going to use your products, you've got a much better objective assessment to make about what packaging do you need. So the question is, should I improve my packaging? Because really it's not an afterthought. And we heard from Dinesh earlier that his experience is that packaging improved packaging sells more product. So, and we know that markets are very high competitive. We have a lot of big companies wanting to get into the market. Presentation and the ability to perform many functions attracts shoppers. So people are looking at packaging, what's in the product, in the pack, and making decisions about the functionality, about the package and the product. And packaging protects the contents from damage, contamination, and great presentation is as critical as is maintaining freshness and shelf life. So various packaging has impacts on shelf life. And we know honey, because of its high and low water activity, is excellent product for shelf life, and we can get many years of storage. So what's happening in the marketplace? And I've got a picture there on the right-hand side of a retail environment, which is very highly competitive, right? And it's the main space in the developed world and in the developing world where products are now actually starting to concentrate. So what's important here is product segmentation. You can see there's lots of different products and varieties and brands, and we call them all shopkeeping units, and different retailers have different formats and different products. It becomes very confusing for the first-time player. But what we are doing essentially is we're offering consumers and shoppers many options. And producers are looking at different ways of presenting those options because things are very competitive. There are many participants, including products coming in from overseas. And it's pretty easy in Australia and New Zealand to import products from other countries. It's obviously a little bit more difficult in Fiji because there's an embargo on imports. And while that embargo exists, you've got an opportunity to grow your marketplace without competition. So everybody is fighting to gain and keep shelf space. And there are regular quarterly reviews, you know, with every supplier in those shelves who have to maintain a justification of why they should keep their spots. And, you know, those sections across the middle or eye level are the most preferred, and that's where they get the most turnover. And the products down the bottom are the slower moving product lines. So there's a whole lot of category management expertise that goes into this. Obviously, a lot of packaging innovation, which we'll talk about, but essentially it's a place where there's high volumes, but low profit margins. And the growth in retailing has grown per capita consumption in Australia and in New Zealand and in Asia enormously over the last sort of 10 years. So let's have a look around what are others doing in the region because, and what's happening in packaging essentially. So mainly we're seeing competition between plastic and glass. Glass remains the king in the premium. Plastic is growing enormously quicker. And I see a lot of products are packed in plastic, particularly PET bottles in Fiji, because you have limited supply of packaging. And you're actually using a lot of the bottled water and the beverage containers essentially to pack your honey, which is okay. But there's obviously opportunities for you to improve. So what you've got to make a decision on is the needs of the product, the consumer preferences, supply of packaging, and the budget you've got to work with. So let's explore what's happening in New Zealand and Australia, because I know many of you would not have much opportunity to go out and visit New Zealand and Australia and look at how you can learn what is happening. So I'm bringing some of that knowledge for you today. So let's talk about Australia. It's obviously 25.7 million people, 30,000 beekeepers, roughly 700,000 hives producing 37,000 tonnes. It's quite a significant volume. And the industry here is split into the commercial sector and the recreational sector. And I think you've got and the recreational section is really growing very fast. There are a lot more beekeepers, smaller beekeepers entering the Australian marketplace, selling to their local communities and regionals. And the commercial market is really fighting over the retail space. In Australia, we have cheap imports. So apologies about that. Coming in from overseas, and they are used by the commercial players to keep the prices down and fill the local supply gaps. We have very low export growth out of Australia. Australia is really focused on the local market and has no time really to grow exports. And really they're growing most of the volume in through the 4,000 supermarkets. Even though there's about 9,000 smaller shops around Australia, there's 4,000 really large ones. And that's Woolies, Coles, Aldi and IGA, Metcash and Independence. And it's these retailers that make most of the profit margins. This is the big difference between Australia and New Zealand. So New Zealand, a much smaller population. Many of you may have travelled to New Zealand. It's closer to Fiji. they've had a really big production season this year, comparatively. They consume similar to the same amount that we consume in Australia per capita, about 1 kilo per person per annum. They have two major supermarket chains which have 85% share, so the retailers really control the domestic market generally. And they have a significant number of registered hives with 9,500 beekeepers. So there is a really vibrant honey production industry. And the big difference between Australia and Fiji, in fact, is their exports. So if you look at that export, that is around $500 million New Zealand were exported last year. So they are making their money at export value, right? Yes, the retailers are making money from the 5,000 tonnes, but the rest of the stock, the other 15,000 to 18,000 tonnes that they export, they make $500 million worth of value. And I think that is a real big pointer for us when we look at the future for Fiji honey. The strategy for me is a very strong domestic market, and potentially in 10, 15 years, Fiji needs to look at how it could grow its exports. And you can imagine that $500 million that comes into those exporters out of Fiji, out of New Zealand, fuels product innovation, right? And that money gets ploughed back into growing the industry and growing more market share globally. So New Zealand is one of the really aggressive export countries, right? And it's marketing its honey in the premium space. And the reason it's doing that, it's using its place, its country of origin, its provenance, and the promotion of New Zealand pure, the global strategy in horticulture and in the dairy industry and in the wine industry, which is giving space opportunities for Fiji honey. So the other differentiating factor is that New Zealand is way ahead in its floral and varietal characteristics. Both taste and quality are significantly improved, and they have a highly segmented product range of products with medicinal aspects, which they have been able to leverage using tea tree, manuka, and really selling their honey at really premium prices. So this is why I've actually made the two comparisons between Australia and New Zealand for you, because the strong margins are driving innovation, and that money is going back into the industry development, and those companies that are operating in New Zealand are becoming very profitable and are able to invest back into their hives and growing their bottling operations and their marketing and their ability to export to all over the world, not just Asia, China and Japan and Korea, but into the Northern Hemisphere and into the USA market, which is showing huge growth in honey. So what are the trends? So I'm going here essentially to look at what are the trends in packaging. And I'm looking firstly at glass, and what we see across Australia and particularly in New Zealand is small packaging in glass, 50 grams, and that is really targeting the food service sector. So you've probably seen countries that have high numbers of tourists, lots of 5-star, 7-star hotels, and airlines with breakfast, with honey and jam products, really driving the volume and the value in that sector, right? And a good example is a company called Berenberg. It goes back to 1839. And when I was exporting in Asia, I used to meet these guys in the hotels because they were growing their distribution. So they virtually had every 5-star, 7-star hotel in Asia with their honey, with their jams. And they've actually driven their growth in Asia with these small packs, the 30-gram, the 14-gram plastic tubs, and the 15-gram capsules. And they've got a very sophisticated packaging system, which allows them to become a market leader in the food service and to scale up to supply the food service, retail, and industrial markets with jams and a lot of other products. So if you go to the website and have a look, you'll just see how they've spearheaded their business and they've become a major player. and they're actually only 10 kilometers, 5 kilometers from my house. The other trends in glass, of course, and I'm showing you some samples here. There's some Beerenberg there, and some prices in per kilo. So premium glass is good presentation, and there are some examples there. Also in large, even though the glass section is contracting, we see people using, premium varieties, honeycomb, and in some cases, large jars, up to 950 gram to promote their products in retail. So glass is premium. It's the only packaging material that's really impermeable. There's very little leaching. It's also much heavier and more costly. And obviously in Fiji, it's very hard to get. And you've got a few wholesalers dealing in glass. So very hard for you to source. Can crack and break and injure, both in the supermarket, in the warehouse, and in the home. It also requires metal and glass and plastic closures. And there are many challenges in automating, filling, closing, and labeling glass packaging, depending on whether it's square, it's round, or it's hexagonal, is it tall, squat, how big is it, etc. But what we are seeing is that the glass use is declining in favor of plastic. But that doesn't mean there's no markets for you in Fiji. The other advantage, of course, is the glass can be recycled endlessly. And in countries that have recycling, glass just goes continuously in a virtual cycle. So I'm going to switch now to plastics, and we're going to talk about the 375mm twist and squeeze plastic products. These are made from PET. They're a very convenience-driven product. High volume share in Australia. 375mm sizes and selling for around the $16 per kilo retail. So when you think about retailers making 40% margin, 50% margin, plus trading terms, then you can see how much low profit Capilano are making. But it's a really high volume. And, here's another company called the Honey Collective selling at $4.40 for the equivalent. So the Honey Collective has seen the market share and is coming in and trying to buy market share in retail because Capilano is the category leader in Australia. So this twist and squeeze is high convenience and it's really attractive, and every mum has one of these on the kitchen table. Then we have this emerging section called the flip lids, which I call, these are all again in PET, and we'll talk about PET and polypropylene later, but these are some examples from Australia, and these are retailed, upside down, some are paper labels, some are plastic shrink labels, and there's a whole lot of different sizes going up to almost 1 kilo. Then we have PET jars. These are with polyprop lids, and there's some New Zealand examples there. And there's less of those in Australia because mostly Australia doesn't have a lot of PET plastic at the moment. But I think it's changing here as well because glass is still becoming much more expensive, and it's very hard to tool up just to do glass on its own if you are doing automated filling, labeling operations. So tubs is also the other growth area where we're seeing both in Australia and New Zealand. These are, tend to be the largest sizes where you spoon out the honey. Then you have buckets, which again competing. These are actually no longer PET, but actually in polypropylene, high density polyethylene. And these sell great volumes. So this is an area that I think is probably missing in Fiji. You probably don't have a lot of packaging available, but you can try and source some of that from Australia and from New Zealand. And maybe you can talk to some producers in Fiji who might be able to produce. Some of the other new innovations are in the eco pouch, which is a squeezable pouch with a side gusset which is clear, so you can see the honey. This is selling for around $17 a kilo, so it's pretty aggressive. It's not inexpensive, but it's convenient, and some people are buying it because they're attracted by the spout and they can pour it out pretty easily. And you also get good information on the pack. So this is something that I came across the other day when I was actually traveling in New Zealand. I hadn't seen it before, but many of you probably have heard of it before. This is actually a honeycomb cassette, which goes in the hive, and essentially the bees do all the work, and then you just actually pack it and retail it. So I thought that was quite an impressive concept, and I believe it's got some popularity in the US as well. I'm not sure how strong it is in Australia in the traditional markets, but I'm sure it was of interest. Other things that I've seen is in cans. Cans have obviously, there's a market opportunity for cans because of their strength. There's obviously other products that are going into other beverage products. Tavernas there have got a honey nectar concentrate, which is made with herbs and cider, which is a bit left field. And then you've got people like Cloverdale, which is selling a mix of Australian and imported honey. And you know, that's a 2.5 kilo pack designed for high volume. So a lot of smaller restaurants and you know, caterers and bakeries who don't have distribution from the large food service distributors can go in the local supermarket and buy that. I mean, that's $24 Australian for 2.5 kilos. So there's a little market for those larger bulk packs. In this section here, I've sort of ventured overseas, and I don't want to dwell too much on it because here there's some innovations that you can see that have been done overseas in packaging and glass, and this is where they bring a lot of the branding and the labeling and the packaging together to really premiumize their products. And I won't go through these dealers, I'll click through these very quickly. There's one that was one from Greece, this one's from Canada. This one's another one from Canada. This is more a design concept made from wax, where you take the lid off, consume the honey, then turn it upside down and then burn the wax. So that's a pretty far out sort of view of packaging. This one is really premium. You know, France is a huge perfume or parfums market around the world, and this company is taking honey to a next level. This one from the UK is a Fortnum & Mason, one of the really premium brands, leveraging off the Queen's birthday a few years back. But really, you can see the presentation on the right-hand side of that particular product. It's really quite impressive. And you know, it takes quite a lot of work to do exactly what they do. Batch numbers and best before dates, handwritten, etc. And there's another brand here from Brazil. You know, they've got very strong packaging presentation. You know, the 20 ml pack here for the propolis, the small packs here, you know, the 60 gram jars, and the whole range of products that they sell in food service and retail. And then you've got New Zealand, where we talked earlier about how, you know, aggressive New Zealand is in exports. It's also very aggressive, and I wasn't going to dwell too much on New Zealand companies, but this one struck my eye because these guys are really innovative. This company, True Honey, sells online, mostly online, and, you know, this particular product comes in a box. You open it, there's only a limited, you know, edition of them, and they sell that equivalent to 2,000 Fijian dollars per pack. So that spearheads a whole lot of other products that they sell, and they use this aspirational rare harvest Manuka high grade product as something really exclusive for the few who can afford it. So let's talk here a little bit about plastic. PET and HDPE are the most safest plastics to use. So I recommend you get to learn about the different, plastics that exist. And there's probably 7 groups of them. And generally you find the numbers on the bottom of the pack. So potentially under a bottle of Fiji, bottled water, which is actually packed and bottled in Fiji, there's a 1 there on the back, right? And that's PET, polyethylene tetraphthalate, and that is a great raw material for using in honey. It does scuff, etc. But I also need you to think about, is it food grade when you're making a selection? Is it food grade? Is it safe? Is it stable? And you therefore need to talk to your manufacturer rather than a wholesaler to make sure, if you're making a significant shift into PET plastic, that it's probably better to deal with a manufacturer who makes the product to ensure that it meets some of those criteria that are listed here. So PET, oops, I'll go back. So glass is generally limited, in my view, to high-price honey, and wide-mouth PET plastic designs are copying and replacing glass designs. So that's my message here. That's the message in Australia. I've got a couple of packs here to show you. These are the preforms in the middle. This is where basically the preforms are supplied, and then there's a blow molding system which blows out the jar on the right-hand side, and then you actually use a lid, essentially, to seal. So if you're looking at sourcing PET, New Zealand is better scaled and progressed in supplying PET, both in round and various sizes. And note, of course, that from this picture here, I've got the HDPE lid and the PET base. And getting a seal between the thread and the design of the cap or the closure is really an engineering issue. Don't leave it to chance, picking different caps and different bottles and hoping that they're going to match. Because I'm sure many of you in Fiji have realized through some of your suppliers that you do get products that are leaking. You aren't getting a good seal, what we call a hermetic seal. And you're getting air going into the product. And when you get air, you're getting mold, bacteria, yeast, and you get a chance of fermentation, right? And that's not a good thing for honey. So the product's going to ferment and you're going to actually make alcohol. And it's probably going to blow up in the supermarket or in the person's pantry. So it's always good when you are designing enclosures to make sure you get a pressure seal or a foil induction, which is pretty sophisticated things to do. But you can obviously buy these from local wholesalers or source direct from manufacturing. And what I've done for you here, I've researched a number of producers in New Zealand and Australia that may be able to help you. So go online and have a look at those organisations and have a look and contact them. Kaipak is really good aggressive, and most of the New Zealand honey producers are buying from Kaipak. And they are really a professional group. That's not to say that Stowers and Croft Park and Farmer Pack there's many Australian suppliers dealing in this place. But if any of you need some help in any of this, I'm happy to sort of direct you or assist you in some of this decision making that you might make. So the other area to look at obviously is buckets and tubs. And you may not be able to source those, but the advantages is they are lightweight. And consider that if you are thinking about getting into online sales, plastic is probably going to be the answer because of weight and simple shipping. So think about online selling if you are considering that, and think about how you're going to post and send product when it's pretty heavy in glass. So explore buckets and tubs. And maybe some of you may want to talk to other producers in Fiji about getting your products contract packed, because, you know, improving your products, putting in bottling operations, automating, buying capital equipment is very expensive. And if you're not going to be a major player, it may be better for you to look at other producers who have a good operation that can help you pack the product for you, right? And also, if you do have a basic bottling operation, why not earn more income from doing work for other producers? So I think in Fiji and in PNG, collaboration among producers is really important, because that's how you need to work together to grow. Not many of you have a deep pocket to put in professional bottling operations like the ones we've seen in Australia and New Zealand. It's going to take time and patience. So you need to think carefully about your decisions, how it's going to impact on many aspects: filling, bottling, capping, closing, labeling, coating, packing into outer cartons, palletizing and shipping to your customers. This is a whole new world of thinking. And then, of course, any decisions you're going to make at the moment are really going to be driven about environmental regulations and the global move to packaging sustainability, bioplastics, etc., which are subjects which we're not going to cover today. So, conclusion, I've given you hopefully some insights to help you review your product packaging. If you can, go back to some of the previous webinars that we did. That'll help you get a better picture.